I have made a video on the most recent ended Pacers era, the Domantas Sabonis/Victor Oladipo era starting in 2017 to 2018. But what about the most recent Pacers era to actually win something and hang a banner in Gainbridge Fieldhouse? Well, that would be the blue-collar gold swagger era, and the only way I can describe it is by telling you a story. The story of a team that belonged to the people of Indiana, a story of a team that the NBA didn't like because of how they acted and how they played.
I mean, you know what? Because y'all motherfuckers don't watch us play throughout the year, to tell you the truth.
And from Xavier University, number 21, he's a man.
Here comes George, got the step and stops one move and counts on a foul. James gets inside. And James and Granger have words. The official Ed Malone gets the now. David West being held back.
Thankful West as he goes to work. And draws the foul. And Hibbert being legal after that shot.
Roy Hibbert is really causing himself a problem. This is getting out of hand because it's going into the stands. This is really out of hand.
Indiana Pacers, including this, blowing in the ear of LeBron James.
On January 30th, 2011, the Pacers hired Frank Vogel to be their head coach after understandably moving on from underperforming coach Jim O'Brien. Now, that season the Pacers finished 37-45, but still somehow made the playoffs. They did lose in the first round in 5 games to the Bulls. Nobody really expected the Pacers to go from fringe playoff team to contender in one offseason, but the Pacers decided to try just that. The first move would be acquiring hometown hero George Hill, who came off a nice year with the Spurs as a 24-year-old. And he would be a very nice addition to the Pacers. Who did they trade to get him? Kawhi Leonard. Now, we all know the Pacers lost this trade. I mean, it's one of the most made fun of trades ever. But at the time it made sense, so let's try to think like it's 2011. After a lockout, the Pacers signed David West, who would go on to be the perfect player for Vogel's defensive system, and in the lockout-shortened year, the Pacers went 42-24, but lost to a soon-to-be familiar foe in the Miami Heat in the second round. And the core of that roster wouldn't really change, with Danny Granger, David West, George Hill, Roy Hibbert, Paul George, and Lance Stevenson all being on the roster, but half of those guys weren't fully developed yet as players, and as they bloomed and grew into their own, so did the rest of the team. But solid role players would be added who would end up strengthening the depth of the Pacers and building a very good chemistry in that locker room. Orlando Johnson was added in a trade where the Pacers only needed to give up cash for a player who had a great locker room presence and an undervalued contribution to the Pacers. Gerald Green was signed, and he would contribute nicely off the bench. The Pacers then traded Darren Collison and Dante Jones for Ian Mahimi, a good backup center for Roy Hibbert. And as a Darren Collison replacement, the Pacers signed DJ Augustine, who was a bit underperforming but not horrible. And this 2012 to 2013 season would be amazing for the Pacers. They went 49-32, won their division, and made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and were going to play the Miami Heat.
Eastern Conference Finals 2-1.
Game 5, back in Miami. The Pacers get it done and improve to 7-1 at home in this 2013 postseason.
Big 2, 90-79. Miami takes the 3-2 lead in the series as they head to Indianapolis for Game 6 on TNT. Space between themselves and the Heat, and they force a Game 7. I got another question. 91-77. Indiana wins Geshen, who's court.
The Pacers, despite fighting against a team with way more star power and the big three of LeBron, Bosh, and Wade, lost in 7 games. A heartbreaking defeat. But just like every time the Pacers got knocked down, it was time to get right back and work to get better. The Pacers drafted Solomon Hill, who would be good young depth for the Pacers. They signed Donald Sloan to add depth, signed CJ Watson for even more depth, traded Gerald Green and Miles Plumlee for Luis Scola, who would be a great bench piece for the Pacers. Oh, and can't forget they signed the GOAT, Chris Copeland. So now with really good depth and a core that had a great balance of veteran leadership in Danny Granger, George Hill, and David West, pure young talent in Lance Stevenson, and star power with Paul George and Roy Hibbert, the Pacers went 56-26 and won their division for the 2nd straight year. Now, this team on paper looks better than last year's team, but moves were made during the season that hurt the Pacers' locker room vibe and chemistry. Danny Granger was traded for Lavoy Allen, who was okay depth but didn't fit the team very well, and Evan Turner, who was also hurting the chemistry in the locker room and made Lance Stevenson uncomfortable, as Lance and Turner have very similar playing styles and made Lance feel like his spot in the rotation wasn't very secure. Another way the team's chemistry was hurt was Orlando Johnson was waived, which a lot of guys on the team liked him and he brought good chemistry to the team, so it just hurt the team overall. And another thing that hurt the chemistry even more was Andrew Bynum was signed, and he had a similar effect on Roy Hibbert that Evan Turner had to Lance Stevenson. So while the Pacers added better players on paper, the hurt they caused the team's well-run system would be really, really bad. But the Pacers made it to the Eastern Conference Finals again, and we're going to play the Heat once again. So throw all the narratives out the window, and let's go win this.
Hibbert goes back door. Kicks it out to George. His three-pointer. Centered by Watson. 3-on-1. Scola down the lane and a finish. Pacers turn. But just stretch him out when he's not in the game, so everything's okay. Stevenson with a nice.
West had 19, Stevenson 17, Hill 15, a total team effort by the Indiana Pacers, who take Game 1.
Looking for Stevenson. Stevenson fires a long 3, and that'll do it. The Eastern Conference.
Just to see a lot of things have to change. What's the key thing that they have to do better in Game 4?
32, 13 of 21 from the field, 10 boards, 5 assists on the night. Lance Stevenson, bottom of James Smith in the game. Stevenson still up in the air, bugging, all up in his life. Big lap out. He'd have to sit later in the quarter. Stevenson comes on into the Heat, winning for Miami. And Hibbert was not on the floor. Wade to James. Shot clock is off. No fouls to get him. James tries. Kicks it out. Bosh, a three-pointer. Won't go. Rebound kept taken by Hibbert. Now West has it. He's fouled with 1 second remaining. Misses. Rebound Bosh. There's the buzzer. The Pacers are still alive. A thriller in Indianapolis as the
For the 4th consecutive year, the Miami Heat are heading to the NBA Finals.
The Pacers once again lost. The core was then torn apart and fell off production-wise. The vets got too old, Roy Hibbert's play style became obsolete, and Lance Stephenson left in free agency. The Pacers then missed the playoffs entirely the next season. So yes, these teams were flawed. Yes, they made mistakes on and off the court. Yes, the front office also made mistakes. Yes, they didn't have a ton of star power, and yes, they were not the most flashy team. But to the people of Indiana, these guys were like heroes. They were all gritty, tough, and went to work every day just like every blue-collar worker in Indiana. This blue-collar gold swagger motto wasn't just something the Pacers could rally around. It was something the whole state of Indiana could apply to whatever they do. Personally, I connected with Roy Hibbert. I loved his defensive dominance and how mad he made offensive stars when he locked them up. My dad connected with David West. His bad man demeanor, his mean mugging, and his tough style was something that my dad, who was a blue-collar worker, could personally connect to. And those are just a few examples of how the people of working-class Indiana could connect with these players. For the people who like to root for villains, toughness, underdogs, and never backing down to anyone or anything, could personally connect with the Pacers. And that is what truly made this team so special. It was typical Indiana Pacers, just like the ABA days back in the 70s and the Reggie Miller days back in the 90s. And hopefully, it comes back in this new Pacers era. I'm Limitless Pulls. I would like to thank you for watching. Subscribe if you like the content. I'm trying to release more of it. It just takes a lot of time to make these documentary style videos, and with school coming back and having football and stuff, it's tough to it's tough to make these as quickly as I did in the summer. But I'm still gonna make a few because it's fun. See you guys next time.
And ball out for everybody and try to win that game. But I was very emotional. You know, the fans here really embrace me every time I'm on that floor, and I love it. And it just feels like family when I get on that court. So I'm just happy that I had that type of game that night.